It's time for John Cogcast and pardon me for all seeking pardons, parole, clemency, inmates deserving who could be serving too much time for what they did. It's time for John Cogcast and pardon me for all seeking mercy, a chance to be free. We'll be learning.
Hi everybody, it's John Cogcast. Everybody calls me Cog. And this is my Cogcast. And today we're going to learn about a deserving pardon petitioner named Pete Parsons. And I'd like to read you his letter to the governor. And it goes a bit like this. Dear Governor, in your inaugural speech, you thanked your father for providing a moral compass that steered you safely to shore. All children should have the right to assume that the world is a safe place, that people, like your father, are there to help, guide, cherish, and love them. Unfortunately, that's not the way it is for everyone. My childhood was dangerous, populated with abusers, both passive and overt, who in the end offered me only one easy way out: self-medication with substances that provided a false sense of safety and security, interspersed with occasional moments of wildness and total withdrawal. Governor, it's my understanding that we both have had extensive experience with military family life. So perhaps this very tiny portion of my background is relatable. Headed by a naval military officer, the Parsons family moved 9 times in my first 10 years. Always the new kid, always an outsider. The rest of my background, we can conclude, veers off sharply from any reasonably normal military upbringing. Number 1, after my father's third divorce from my mother, yes, third divorce from the same woman, I was the product of another attempted reconciliation. That's how I came into this world. Military life was particularly difficult for my mother, who had once trained as an operatic soprano and concert pianist, of all things. Transient military life had no place for such things as opera singing and concert piano playing. As years went by, she busied herself filling prescriptions for uppers and downers at naval bases from Norfolk to Philadelphia, throwing tantrums, screaming, crying, threatening to drop a match in this death trap and run in front of me and my siblings, and hitting us too. All manifestations, I'm told later, of bipolar disorder and addiction. And the teenage parties that I was involved in, even when I wasn't a teenager. In the late 60s and very early 70s, when my father and my mother were away, physically or mentally, me and my older siblings and their friends went berserk. Weed, LSD, alcohol, and other stuff I can no longer even remember. I was a heavy-set kid back then, so to make me slimmer and more focused, my mom offered up black coffee and prescription amphetamines for breakfast. I was in 2nd grade at the time. My older sisters had hippie friends, and they enjoyed introducing their fat 2nd grade brother to peace and love, tuning in and turning on. My older brother hung with hard druggies, who were much less enjoyable all around. For example, they caught me and one of my few boyhood friends I ever had. We were playing near a creek during the summer of '73. They claimed my older brother owed them money and began pushing us around. My friend turned and ran, but I stood firm and I punched one of the dudes. They proceeded to beat me on my hands and knees, and then they began kicking me, and then they held my head under the creek while sodomizing me. I passed out. When I regained consciousness, everyone had fled. Gathering my clothes, bleeding, I stumbled home. Mom, as usual, wasn't there. Dad was tinkering in the garage. He looked at me and asked what happened. I told him. He grabbed his Navy .45 and dragged me back to the creek. The only thing we found were footprints in one of my socks. On the way back home, he concluded, apparently after some thought, that this'll kill your mother. No sense dwelling on it. Let it go. Football starts in a month. Get some road work in. Be in shape. That was it. I was 7 years old. After that, sleep became an issue for me. I'd wander around the house at all hours. I found out my father was sexually abusing one of my sisters. Much later, both sisters. When I was 10, my sister Penny would drink to the point of inebriation and then try to seduce me and berate me for not responding. Some of the physical injuries and permanent scars visited on me by my father and mother while growing up in this dysfunctional household were as follows. A, permanent nasal sinus and ear canal damage from Dad's fists, stitches from being thrown through a plate glass window, marks from beatings with a chain-link dog leash. My entire immediate family, brothers, sisters, parents, dying from substance abuse, except me. Eventually, I grew up and got out. Sports, rugby, wrestling, football, and track saved my life. But as I got older, they all ended. I discovered that I was very good at selling, perhaps based on the occasional time I could talk my way out of beatings. Legitimate things like office furniture, for example, I could move. And one of the few achievements I'm proud of in my adult life is that I had an award-winning career for many years as a furniture salesman. But so what? I could make money legitimately, but it seems I spent it all either illegitimately or foolishly. I would do well for a while and then relapse. One failed relationship after another, choosing women in worse shape than I was, delusional that I could save them when I couldn't save myself. My last relationship ended, appropriately, with a protective order against me. After that, I went on a 5-day binge, a suicidal spree of crack, heroin, and not caring about living or dying. And during that 5-day spree, minding her own business and strolling along Route 1, was a 16-year-old girl who knew absolutely nothing about Peter Parsons and his going on a hustle binges. See, whenever I needed drug money and had none, I would diplomatically accost people, usually women, because as a salesman, I knew women were the majority of furniture buyers, and exclaim, excuse me, but I got robbed or lost my wallet, and I'm running low on gas. Could we exchange info for just a small amount of cash? And when I get home, back on my feet, whatever, I will send every bit back to you that you've loaned me today, plus a bit more. Believe it or not, it usually worked. I could gather hundreds of dollars an hour with such hustles. Then I was off to connect with my dealer. And that's how this crime started that has justifiably kept me in prison for 16 years and could keep me locked up for a second, well, almost another 16-year stretch. I pulled up to this young girl walking down the side of the road and babbled my usual lines. She looked uncomfortable and kept moving, and then for this suave-talking, dapper furniture salesman, all of a sudden something just snapped. I jumped out of my car, grabbed her, and forced her back in, then ran around to the driver's side and attempted to speed off. Her purse knocked over a nearly full 40-ounce that I had on the seat, and the vehicle began stinking of beer. I produced a knife and ordered her to calm down. I pulled over to a secluded area, told her my troubles over and over again, and then forced her to degrade herself. I was maniacal, desperately in need of a fix, and downright mean. To provide the listener with a clear picture of just how out of control I was then, after the assault, I took the poor girl to her place of employment in an area shopping center and walked in with her, still hoping to convince someone to give me cash for drugs. Of course, she related the incident to coworkers. Of course, there were video surveillance cameras. I drove off from the area as fast as I could, careening down the road, and then finally, a small amount of common sense, followed by huge amounts of remorse, began cascading into my consciousness, which prompted me to turn around, drive back to the shopping center, now alive with police cars and an ambulance, and peacefully turn myself in. I could not believe I had done this. After extensive reading and program, I know very well why I did something so far out of character. This was a deadly, compulsive binge of hard drugs and over 100 hours of sleep deprivation. Due to my size and the high tolerance, instead of killing me, it cut off any cognitive reasoning ability, and I became an animal. Let's face it. An animal. This was all my fault, and I accept all responsibility. My resentments and self-pity had irrevocably hurt an innocent person. I understand this very well, having to live with it for the rest of my life. Maybe why the majority of my time has been spent on drug recovery and carrying the message to others. Remorse. Remorse is inadequate to describe how I feel about what I did that day to this very day. Based on my entire life's history, everyone can see I am no serial predator. That poor girl told me something after the attack I can't forget. She said, "Someone hurt you, and you put that pain on me. Not fair." So I have done things to make amends, knowing full well that nothing I can do truly fixes what I did. After I was successfully diagnosed and properly medicated, 1,600 milligrams of lithium daily for 3 years to stabilize while clean from street drugs, from my own bipolar disorder and PTSD while in prison, and taking into account the drug problems that killed my entire family and the drug problem I had that surely caused lifelong pain to my one and only victim since my arrest in 2005. Well, since then, I've engaged with the Department of Corrections Victim Services Unit, and I've spoken multiple times in prison church regarding possible restitution services for victims. I've completed a Doctors Seeking Safety program for substance abusers with PTSD. I have submitted proposals to begin a life recovery conference that would complement existing NA and AA prison recovery programs as an aid to inmates in sobriety recovery. I have earned multiple certificates of achievement in substance abuse and certificates of recovery, certificates of completion. I've implemented a 12-step program with the help of staff members in one of the prisons I was in. That program started with 11 inmates, which soon grew to 40. At another institution, I regularly chair the Friday 12-step meetings. I have maintained continued employment while incarcerated, more than a decade as a woodshop clerk, and I have exemplary annual reviews. In fact, it's my understanding that the Virginia Governor's Office boasts a cherrywood desk and credenza from our prison plant. While incarcerated, I became a state-certified GED tutor. While incarcerated, I became an authorized BARK rescue dog trainer. I have trained offenders in design and material usage and forklift operations. I obtained my CAD certification, and I reside in the honors dorm. Not incidentally, I have had a perfect institutional record. No prison infractions, Governor, and I'm told that's extremely rare. I believe Virginia has offered a second chance program, or is considering offering a second chance program for deserving inmates. And if an inmate has a perfect institutional record for half of their sentence, that they may deserve a second look. I've completed half my sentence with a perfect record. Should I be blessed with a second look and doubly blessed with a second chance? Here are my plans. I'm going to partner with a longtime friend and move to Green Bay, Wisconsin. It's a furniture manufacturing hub. And to continue in the field I've always excelled in, which is selling furniture. He has property there, and we're going to try to open it up to BARK animal housing. Utilizing the skills I've learned in regard to correctional drug and behavioral counseling, I'm going to continue such mentorship for newly released inmates whenever and wherever I can for the rest of my life. Thank you, Governor, for considering this clemency request. Respectfully, Peter C. Parsons. I'd like to tell you a little bit about Peter Parsons, and we're going to call this an amazing turnaround. He became horribly addicted to alcohol and drugs while still in grade school. His family provided the substances that would chase him through adolescence into adulthood. Mental, physical, and sexual abuse created a need for him to continue to self-medicate, spiraling horribly out of control until the final act that landed him with a 30-year prison sentence in 2005. Today, he is sober and an entirely different person. Due to addiction issues, going to prison saved my life, he said. He's had no dirty urine screens or institutional charges within the last 16 years he has spent incarcerated. By 2008, after medication and counseling, the fog finally cleared for Mr. Parsons. He learned that to stay sober, he needed to set off down a path to help others with their sobriety. He started a 12-step program with the help of a staff member. He has a passion for recovery education, and he facilitated most of those 12-step sessions. They started with just 11 men and grew to 40. In addition to full institutional compliance, Mr. Parsons has maintained continuous employment and has received exemplary reviews. He's lived in the honors dorm. He worked for 10 years as a woodshop clerk before being transferred to another prison, and he's regularly chaired the Friday 12-step meetings there. Recently, he submitted a proposal for a life recovery conference. It was slated for September 2020 in the hopes of following up with NA and AA weekly programs to help the inmate population maintain their sobriety. Of course, the pandemic kind of stalled that, but it's ready to go. Mr. Parsons himself has earned many certificates of achievement in substance abuse and certificates of recovery and certificates of completion in NA. In addition, he's earned certificates of completion in tutoring and in drafting as a design technician, earning his CAD certification. He's not been idle and has used his time while incarcerated to make himself a better man. He has much support, receiving 3 letters of recommendation from prison officials and people who work in the prison. He's received 22 letters of recommendation from Virginia Department of Corrections staff, 4 from sergeants, 2 from lieutenants, 1 from the head of the treatment department, 1 from a unit manager, 1 from a senior warden, and many, many from multiple officers. These are all people who've been around Mr. Parsons for the last 16 years and know his character and behavior as an inmate and have watched him work hard to improve himself. In addition, he has the support of 2 elected officials, one of whom who wrote, "I'm ready to do whatever you need. I know how hard you have worked. You have served the time more than enough." And I'd like to read you a character letter about Mr. Parsons that was sent in with his pardon petition. And it goes like this. It says, "Dear Honorable Governor, I am writing you regarding my uncle, Peter C. Parsons. Please consider him for reentry via conditional pardon. He has been incarcerated since his arrest in 2005. Under his guideline circumstances, he would have served about 15 years. Instead, he's scheduled to be released in 30 years, taking us to 2031. I was not present for his sentencing, but wish I could have said a word about our family. I have firsthand knowledge of generational abuses, including beatings, rape, and incest, affecting Pete and his sisters. Addiction ran rampant in our family. Pete was exposed to and fed hard drugs for self-medication since elementary school. He was always loving and trying to succeed, but acting out under the influence would undermine his potential, hence this tragic situation before you. Pete has made serious strides toward making himself and all those around him better, through one program, one conversation at a time. He is such a positive, inspiring person. Currently, he has been clean, sober, mentally stable, and working to achieve greatness, even behind the bars of a maximum security prison. That's no easy task. He started and facilitated a drug program in one prison. Now he works in that capacity at another prison, chairing a 12-step meeting and organizing a life recovery conference. Even the senior warden, who has known Pete for 10 years and specifically quoted in his recommendation letter, quote, "Mr. Parsons' behavior is consistent with those who are successful in recovery upon reentry," unquote. Pete has many letters of support, including 21 Virginia Department of Correction employees and 16 women, stating he is a man of character and no longer a threat to anyone. Please, I beg of you to consider my uncle for reentry to society. I have a special needs child who would benefit from a good male role model like my uncle. I have no doubt he would be a great example of hope for anyone struggling with addiction and mental health issues. He has a massive support system, including home plans offered in Green Bay, Wisconsin, Virginia, Ohio, and New Hampshire. Thank you for your time. And that's the history, background, and current situation of inmate Pete Parsons. We thank you for watching. I'm John Cogcast. This is my Cogcast, and we'll do this again where we'll talk about another deserving pardon petitioner. Until then, we'll see you, and thumbs up.